Finding the perfect tactic for your team in Football Manager is certainly not easy. There's so many different factors to consider, but don't worry because today I'm going to break it down from A to Z, everything you need to know to make the right tactic, the perfect tactic for your team. That's right, I'll be showing you everything you need to know about finding the right tactic for your team in today's video. This is from a save where I've actually done this exact thing myself, where I don't know much about the players I've got, I don't know much about the club, and ended up finding a very good tactic for us. This is part of a rebuild that I did on my channel, and this tactic ended up being very successful. So I'm going to break down everything I did to find the right tactic for this team from start to finish. Before we get started though, if you do enjoy the video, make sure you smash that like button for us. It will really help us out, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you think I've missed anything in this video, do let us know, or if you've got any questions, put them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer. With that being said, let's kick off how to find the perfect tactic for your team. So let's imagine you're the same as me. You've got a squad that you don't really know much about, you don't know who the star players are or how much depth you've got in a certain position. The first step that I take when taking over a new club, which I do every week for the rebuilds on my channel, so I'm used to doing this, is I go ahead and I'll make a blank slate tactic. Now this is what I ended up coming up with in this save, or at least started with, and we tweaked it a little bit later on. But obviously normally there'll be no tactic here when you first start a save, and you'll be given all of these options as your first tactic. The first thing that I suggest you do though is go down, click create your own style, and just put in a very basic 4-3-3 template. You'll see why we're doing this later. Don't worry, this is not the tactic that you're going to run with. There you go, the 4-3-3 is ready for a step that I'm going to show you later. But of course at this stage it is worth pointing out that there is going to be no one specific tactic that gets your team working where all of us can't. You're going to find a lot of tactics will work for your team, but it's about finding the right one that suits the balance of the ability of your players, also the depth of your players in your team, and gets the best out of your star men, which is what I'm going to show you how to do today. The first thing I suggest is go on over to your squad screen, and we're going to do exactly what I just mentioned. We're going to find our star players by selecting this ability tab here. That will filter everyone based on their ability. From here we get our idea of who our players are that are above the average, the best players in our team, and we're going to want to take note of that. So we've got Pepe as a centre back. We're going to want to take a look at his best role. He's not exactly going to be the world's best ball playing defender with 12 passing, 10 vision, but he's a decent central defender and can also play as a wide centre back. So we note that. We also see Diogo Costa is a good sweeper keeper, as well as on the standard goalkeeper duty. He'd be good there too. We've got Galeno being right footed, and the fact that he likes to cut inside from the left wing. Winger would work for him, yes, but also inside forward could be a good role for him. So we've got a very big talent on the wings there. Then we've got some centre backs, and two of our best players are actually strikers, so we're going to need to know that for later too. But one thing that I'm picking up straight away here is that in our best set of players we've got some good wingers and some good strikers. So we've identified our best positions on the pitch. By doing so, seeing that we've got such good attacking players on the flanks and through the middle, I don't think I'm going to go for a narrow tactic. I'm going to want to have wingers in some shape or form. Obviously for you guys your team will be different, but it's about doing those deductions at the start of your save to figure out where might be the best way to go with your tactic. Staying on track of analysing this squad, the next thing that I do on top of finding out our best players is see where we've got the most players. And what I mean by this is if you go over to your squad planner, you'll be able to see your depth in every single position. If we switch it to the 4-3-3 that you guys would have, we're going to click ask assistant, suggest for everything, and then get rid of B team and under 19s. That way we can see our full first team squad and figure out where we've got an excess of players which might guide us in our tactical shape. The reason I chose the 4-3-3 is so that we get a good balance of all the roles on the pitch to find out where our best depth areas are. By choosing the 4-3-3 we can see how many wingers we've got, how many number 6s we've got, how many central midfielders. What I'm looking for here is to just find any extra information that might help us about our side. The first thing I always check is centre of defence. How many players have we got? If we've got say 7 first team members here, I might start thinking that 3 at the back would be a good system to play, but we've only got 5 potential centre backs, one of which is not very good at all. That mainly leaves 4 centre backs, which to me means we've got 2 starters and 2 rotation options for those. Again, if we had an excess of players at centre back, it might drive me towards thinking about a 5 at the back a little bit more, but I think with the players we've got here, I'd be inclined to go for a 4 at the back system. Again, you can use this section to check on your wingers. If you only had one decent winger at the club, for example, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a guarantee you need to have players out wide. Maybe you could go for a narrow narrow system, but clearly we have a lot of players out on the wings, and that's something that's going to need to feature in our tactic. In central midfield, we've got a pretty big balance of players here. Are all of them really amazing? No, but there's a lot of players in there. You could argue actually in terms of ones that could influence the first team, we've got 5 options. In defensive midfield, it's pretty much the same names as well. So I feel like we've got 5 midfielders in the centre of the park. Whether that's perfect for a 3 in midfield or a 2, I'll figure out later based on other positions. But what I did do when I was doing this rebuild myself was that I noticed our striking position is where we had a lot of talent. If I played Evan Nilsson as a solo striker, it would mean Mehdi Taremi would not get on the pitch. It would also mean Tony Martinez and Danny Namaso also wouldn't play football. And even though it's only saying they're 2.5-star players, they are pretty big talents. And realistically, if it was a 1-striker system, both of these probably wouldn't play. Namaso or Martinez would hardly get any minutes because Taremi would take all the minutes off the bench from Evan Nilsson. So straight away here, I identified that a lot of our talent was up front, and that guided me to wanting to play a 2-striker system, knowing that we needed wingers from earlier, and straight away I was thinking about a 4-2-4. So straight away, by analysing what we've done so far, we figured out our best players, identified whether a 5 at the back would be a possibility or not, and we figured out that maybe a 2-striker system could be a good way to go. Now for you guys, you might be someone that always has a set tactic that you use for every team, and this video is not going to be for you. But if you're trying to find a tactic that works for a squad that you know very little about, this is a great way to start figuring it out. Now Porto are obviously one of the strongest teams in our league, but one thing I suggest you all do is head on over to your competition and then go down to season preview. Now this isn't going to be super accurate, but from here you can find out whether your team is expected to be a dominant team or not. Porto, of course, are expected to be one of the best in the league, so I'm pretty happy to go for a positive attacking tactic. But if you were, say, Luton in the Premier League and you saw yourself all the way down here, it's probably not the best idea to go gung-ho trying to score 1 million goals a game, because chances are you're not going to be able to do that. So you need to bear in mind not just who your best players are, but how good your team actually is. Are they able to be an attacking team? Do you need to think more cautiously, more counter-attacking if you're a worse team? Of course, that doesn't mean you can't go attacking with a bad team. It's just worth keeping in mind when moving forward. So now that we've done our full analysis of our squad and our best players, and we've got a little bit of an idea of where to go with the tactic, it's a good idea that we now check in with our assistants to see what they think is going to be the best tactic for us. At the end of the day, Football Manager is probably going to know best about what's going to work with your team, so let's see what they say. The way to do this is click create a new tactic, and anyone with the thumb up here is a tactical style that might suit your team. Now we've looked in terms of numbers, in terms of 3 centre-backs or 2, 2 strikers or 1, but what we haven't necessarily figured out yet is whether our team is gifted technically, whether they're really good physically and would dominate in an aerial battle, because that's also going to guide the way that you play your game. If you've got a team that's really good in terms of winning balls in the air, you might be looking for wing play. If you've got a team that's really good on the ball technically, then maybe a tiki-taka system. For us, it seems gegenpress, wing play, and also fluid counter-attack are suggested. For me, I don't think we want to play counter-attacking football with a team as good as Porto. I don't want to be waiting on other teams to attack us. I want to be aggressive, get in their faces, and for that reason, I chose gegenpress in this save. I do that in a lot of saves, to be honest, but control possession, tiki-taka, all of those are very good for dominant sides, whereas if you're a lesser side, maybe counter-attacking, route 1, if you're a really poor team technically, or wing play, could be a good idea. Vertical tiki-taka too, I feel like works quite well with teams that maybe aren't as gifted as some others. Of course, if you want to, you can go ahead and create your own style. I would personally say to try and avoid anything like Catenaccio or Park the Bus that are more defensively focused. I think in game it doesn't work great and invites too much pressure. That might just be my experience, but that's what I'd say. In this case though, you go to any of the ones with a thumbs up and you'll also get an idea from your assistants about what styles they think suits your team, and straight away you can see they agree with us about having 2 strikers. They think a 4-2-4 would be a good system for our team to play. Now if that didn't align with what I'd figured out from my team, then you can make your own choice. You can ignore your assistants' thumbs up and suggestions, but based on the fact that their suggestion suits very much what I was thinking based on my squad, I went ahead and I chose that 4-2-4. Now you don't have to stick with this forever, you don't have to have it the exact way that the assistants made it. This is now where you start tweaking it to your own liking based on your players. So I'm going to go ahead, click this drop down, click pick without rotation, and then pick best 11. This will put most of my best players in this team for this tactic, irrespective of if they're injured injured, suspended, or on holiday, and we can get an idea of how our team is going to be laid out. Now, straight away from earlier, we can remember Galeno was a very good winger, but also has the traits that say he might be good at coming inside, and as a manager that likes to use inside forward, I said that like I'm a real manager, I'm not, as a football manager player who likes to use inside forward, I actually went ahead and I switched this to be an inverted role. You can see by the time I created my final tactic, I did end up going for inverted winger on the left and inside forward on the right, but this was just after a bit of tweaking and testing. What I did know though is that I wanted some kind of inverted position on the pitch, so let's say that I did go for inverted winger on support duty. But what I can also tell here is one of our best players, Taremi, isn't really comfortable in this pressing forward role with only a 2.5-star rating. He's only got 13 work rate, it's definitely not his strong suit, but he's got a really good all-round game, both passing, strength, aerial ability, and for that reason deep line forward was suggested for him, which would be perfect in a front two. Now again, later on in this rebuild, the tactic that you're seeing here, I ended up switching it a little bit and having a complete forward. That was after a few friendly games I realised I wanted some better performance out of our link-up from our strikers, so I went for complete forward, but either way, deep line forward would have been a fine role, and you can see already we're starting to put our own ideas onto the squad to get the best out of these players on the pitch. The next thing I always do with my systems is to just quickly click this analysis button, and it will tell you where any weak points are on the pitch, any areas that aren't covered. You can see we're very well covered in the defensive phase, but there's a bit of space just in front of the midfield that can be occupied by the opposition team. The fact that the grid isn't as green in certain areas mean we have less presence in that section, so what I eventually did, and I always do this with 4-2-4s to be honest, is I move those central midfielders forward, drop one of these into a deep line role, and then change this to a box-to-box midfielder. I put Varela on a support role, and straight away our tactic is offering more balance, so just by doing this, we're already creating a tactic that looks like in game it should work quite well. It suits our players, the assistant recommended it, and the analysis is showing we're covering certain areas of the pitch. Now this is from here where you can start tweaking things based on your friendlies, and that's what I always suggest. For season 1 at least, play your friendlies and try and figure out what works well for the players you've got. The gegenpress that the game provides, particularly in possession, is quite basic, so you can start adding some extra things onto there if you want to start doing low crosses. If you want to do floated crosses, maybe you've got really good players in the air, that could be something you go for. You can decide if they want to dribble less, run at defence. I wouldn't suggest you click everything here, you don't need to do that. Just pick some things that you want as part of your tactic. This is where you'll have to use your own initiative of course, and do that for all sections. Again, don't overload it, don't have every single section having an option in there, but start having a look at what you might want. Maybe you do want to hit early crosses, you can add that. Maybe you want them to be a bit more expressive, and maybe you want the passing directness to be a little less sure. I'm not saying that's what I went for, but this is where you start playing your friendlies, analysing your team, and you start making tweaks over time. And that doesn't just apply to the general tactic too, this works for individual roles. You can do this straight away if you know exactly what you want your players to do, but again, over time in friendlies, it's a good time to figure things out and to tinker with stuff, and you will realise that even though you don't need them, you will get some better performances, particularly out of your best players, if you go ahead and add some personalised instructions, whether that's for the role by clicking this position button, or if you just really want Pepe when he plays, for example, to, I don't know, mark tighter or sit narrower, you can tell him to do that. It's always a good idea to add maybe one instruction onto each player should you want to. You don't have to at all, but if we can tell, for example here, that Varela, maybe he's not great on the ball, he is, don't worry, but let's say he wasn't, and we wanted our deep line playmaker, maybe he was better on the ball to do most of the playmaking, as you can probably get from his role, we can go ahead to Varela and maybe just ask him to take less risks, just pass it off nicely to players near him, and then they can do the harder job of passing it about. So it's from here where you'll really learn about the players in your team and the tactic. Now, one thing that I should note is I don't necessarily think the best thing to do is to always change your tactic based on the players you've got. It's just a good place to start as a starting point. The reason I say this is you might make a tactic that gets the best out of Taremi, but then Taremi leaves the club and you have to switch it all around. For example, if we see Varela here, he is apparently best as a Carrillo. I wouldn't go out there and just set him as a Carrillo just because it's his best role. I would only do that for a few key players in the team to start off with. You've got to try and find a balance between having roles that get the best out of your really good players, but also having roles that fit the balance of the team nicely. If we just went for everyone's favourite role, which is something I used to do when I first started playing FM, you're not going to get the best results at all. From here, the next thing I suggest you do is not only set up your set pieces by just going with what the assistant recommends, but also create a version of your tactic that's very similar, but you're going to want this one to be for when you have the really hard games. games. For example, if we were Porto, we're going to dominate the league, but if we're playing Champions League matches, we might struggle against big clubs. So what I'll tend to do is I'll add another tactic, I'll copy the one that I've created, and I'll make one that's maybe a little bit less aggressive in terms of, say, the press or the defensive line. Maybe in some games against the bigger teams, you want to drop back a little bit. Maybe you want to be less expressive on the ball, take fewer risks, be a bit more direct than you might normally be. Whatever you want to do, I suggest it's always a good idea to have that backup tactic ready. Most of the time you'll run with your initial tactic, but if you get into those big games, it's always good to have that second tactic ready, or else you might find yourself in a tough situation throwing a new tactic on some players at half time and they won't be ready for it. At least this way they can start training that second version of the tactic and they already know most of it. It's just a slight tweak. From there, you'll be much better set for those big matches when they come. One handy feature I will point out before we finish off with this video is if you go Data Hub, matches, and then either last match or last 5 matches after, say, the friendly period, you'll start getting instructions from your assistant about things they might want to add on to the tactic. You can either take this into account based on what they're saying or disregard it, but it's always a good idea because we can see here we've conceded 3 out of 3 goals that we've conceded recently have been from around the penalty spot. If we wanted to, we could go for a low block. Again, you can disregard it if you want to, but it can just help tweak that tactic slightly to help your team out. So make sure you take into account all of this stuff. And I know there'll be people out there saying, but Jake, you said you need to have 2 tactics and you only had 1 set. Well, that's because it's part of a rebuild for my channel, and on the rebuilds, I don't play games, I simulate them. So I go ahead and let my assistant do it. So I'm not actually managing hands-on in this particular save, but if I was managing hands-on, then for sure I would have that second tactic prepared and ready. So there you go. That's everything you need to know about building the perfect tactic for your team. If you found it useful, smash the like button and let me know any comments you might have. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.